And I'd like to ask our panelists to give their perspective about what they see in their area. So Ange, why don't we start with you and share your experience as an employer and what you see with new hires and what you need to do to remedy deficiencies and bring your workforce.
Thanks, Linda. I had mentioned to Linda before that obviously there's no issue with a glass ceiling on this panel, so so I don't know if we call it glass floor for myself or what. But you know, how appropriate the tagline that leadership is our business, because quite frankly the whole conversation that we're going to have today centers around that. It's not a question of management. Right? This whole issue of where do we go from here and why we're in the position that we're in centers around our ability to lead, centers around our ability to have a vision and then to align that. And in this context, we're talking about that vision of education, training, and development and how it satisfies what the really strategic objectives are. And so to that end, I think it begins the conversation and the question that Linda asked as what are we looking for? Well, what we're looking for are the kinds of skill sets that will align with where we're going strategically as a business. Because if we don't have that alignment, okay, as we begin to start that, then we can have a very successful operation, but the patient dies, and we end up, you know, bragging about how well the incision was made and how tight the suturing were. By the way, the business just happened to fail because we didn't have alignment with those skill sets. So I think you know, to answer the question, you know, what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for reverse engineering. Where do we need to go? What is going to bring us towards the future? And then what are the skill sets that are going to get us there? And what that also does, it helps then to align the individuals in terms of their career development with where they want to go. So we have to think of it, you know, really as a process and as a system, as opposed to a series of discrete events where you do a training program or you do an education program and then you try to bolt it on someplace and hope that it makes a fit. You have to start the other way around. Like, what are we really trying to accomplish? And what's the real objective? And then the education and training and development and the skills that we're looking for are going to be the means to an end.
Thank you. And Andrea, colleges are similarly confronting students who are arriving not quite ready to do the work. Can you talk about how you're handling that in public higher ed?
Well, you know, the alignment is definitely the key word in higher education as well. We still find that the students who are going to be able to graduate, the students who are going to succeed, are students who performed well in K-12, students who had a strong academic background, took rigorous college preparatory courses, and did well in them. And that's not surprising because if you think about it, in order to do well in your coursework in K-12, in high school, you have to have those qualities that you're looking for. You have to have persistence. You have to have a sense of maturity, a sense of responsibility. You have to have good attendance. And unfortunately, what we're finding is that there's a disparity among students who are coming into our institutions because our four-year institutions do have admission standards that require the strong academic background, that require a minimum GPA and the completion of a particular set of courses. We find that those students tend to be better prepared, and while some may need remediation, far fewer need remediation than in the community colleges where only a high school diploma is needed for entry. And so the data that Linda referred to earlier about the 37% of students needing remediation when they come to college, if you look at the data in a disaggregated form, you find that the figures are upwards of 90% in mathematics, for example, in some of our community colleges. You also find that students who perform at only the basic level on the MCAS tend to need remediation, whereas those who score advanced or proficient don't need remediation. And so that strong high school background, that strong sense of personal responsibility is what students really need in order to succeed in our institutions. There also, we find that students tend to be surprised that when they come to a higher education institution, their there aren't the same set of supports. There's no bell to tell you when to go to class. Mommy and daddy aren't there to remind you to do your homework. You have to be responsible to do it yourself. Mommy and daddy aren't going to say at the end of your classes, make sure you go to the library and study. You have to be able as a student to manage your time yourself. And so those are some of the skills that we find are missing, especially in students who may be first-generation college students, but also students who may have been, who may have benefited while they were going through high school from, is it Velcro parents now or helicopter parents? But even those students, it may take some time to figure out the differences between high school and college.
Thanks. And Maura, just wearing your Board of Elementary and Secondary Education chair hat, can you tell us what is happening in K-12 to respond to these kinds of situations that employers in higher ed are facing?
Sure. So I'm sure most of you know that the Board of Ed is 11 people, and with one exception, a senior in high school, we are all employers. So we look at this with a very sharp lens, and our job is to take legislation and to promulgate regulations that make Massachusetts stay first in the nation and hopefully first in the world in terms of educational outcomes. So we deal with such wide range of policy, and it's a wonderful pleasure and honor to serve on the board. If I look at some of our work, I'd have to say honestly we focused primarily on college readiness initially, and we can talk more about that later if there's time. We realized that college readiness and career readiness have many of the same components, and so last year we launched a task force under the leadership of Gerald Chertavian, who's the CEO and founder of Year Up. I'm sounding like my children now, Year Up. And Gerald has significant experience in career readiness. That's what he does for a living. Gerald has assembled 40 distinguished citizens of the Commonwealth, including Mrs. Noonan, including CEOs, including academics, K-12 people, people from the department. And we're essentially looking at 4 strands. We're looking at what are the standards in true career readiness? How would we measure those standards? What is it that businesses can do to partner? And that's a broad range of things. It's not one shoe for every business. And then lastly, do we need to make some statutory changes? And sometimes it's helpful if the state mandates certain things. So it's a very exciting process and project. The task force will complete its work this month and then bring recommendations to the board. And in June, the board will vote on what we think makes sense with an eye to what's responsible and actually how can we help K-12 with this as opposed to telling K-12 what to do.